Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
There we go. Welcome to the program as Tennessee does exactly what they were supposed to do, and that is they beat Virginia quite handily. A game that was never truly in hand, maybe a slight let up in the middle of the first half, but I never had really any doubt, and I doubt you did as well, that Tennessee was going to pull off the win against a Cavaliers team that we talked about could be one of the worst in the Power 5 conferences, or what we have left of that. So as we look at this game, let's take a look at a couple of things. It was defensively dominated as Tennessee wins 49-13. It was a game in which Tennessee's offense hit a little bit of a lull, a small lull, but for the most part, looked to be as explosive as last year. Joe Milton, I thought, played incredibly well. We can point out a couple of errant passes here and there, but as far as what he was able to do and complete balls downfield, look comfortable in the pocket, know when to run, I was very impressed as a whole. So go ahead and click that like button. If you haven't subscribed now, do so. And let's see it in the comment page, what you thought of Tennessee's 49-13 win over Virginia. Let's start with you, Caleb Calhoun. What did you think of Tennessee's 49-13 win over Virginia?
I thought exactly what you said. They mostly did what they needed to do. Obviously, what's really going to stand out to a lot of people are the miscues in the first and second quarter. I mean, I tracked it. There were 5 drives Tennessee didn't score after the first touchdown. One of those drives was due to a Ramel Keaton drop. Another one was due to a 4th and 1 where they were stopped. Another one was due to a Joe Milton 3 overthrows. And then there was the D. Williams fumble. So really 4 of those 5 drives, they stopped themselves. But give them credit. They came back, the 90-yard drive towards the end of the half, and then the final touchdown drive at the end of the half were both superb drives. I mean, that last touchdown drive at the end of the first half, that's Heupel at his finest. Let's be honest. That is Heupel at his best. There's not a better 2-minute coach in college football than Josh Heupel. And that really got them going. They scored on 4 straight touchdowns after that. So I thought there were a lot of positives from that point. Look, I mean, up until that 41-yard pass to Keaton, which I'm going to write was the turning point in the game, honestly, late in the second quarter, I thought we were going to start talking about Nico Iamaleava maybe taking Joe Milton's job a little bit early. But he settled down.
That thought crossed my mind for a brief moment, but it wasn't long-lasting whatsoever, because I think you have to look at any quarterback, and there is any person can get shaken in that regard. And I do think he got a little bit shaken after the drop by Ramel Keaton. I thought, hey, that's a touchdown. Let's get this thing rolling. I'm going to be able to take my gear off at halftime. And I think that frustrated him. And I also thought in a pregame interview, it was insightful on ESPN when they asked him, they said, how far have you thrown a ball, as he was walking along the field pregame? And he said, I guess 90 yards. He's sick of answering all that stuff. And when he dropped a perfect dime in there to Ramel Keaton and it was dropped on that deep ball, I think he wanted it. So you don't want to get down on yourself. It's snap and clear, not snap 4, 5, or 6 or 7 or 8 times and clear. So you'd like to see him bounce back immediately. He did miss some people in that one brief period. But as a whole, I mean, I think you have to give this an A for Tennessee to go out and win that handily. The game was, anytime you have a game that's never really in hand, especially against a Power 5 conference in the second half, I think that's a pretty impressive debut and a pretty good showing.
I agree. For the most part, yeah, it was. They did exactly what they needed to do, and like I said, there's really not a lot you can criticize outside of the only reason it wasn't 70-13 was because of their own miscues. Dave, you brought up something though that I kind of thought about with Joe Milton last year, but it really stands out to me, which is we kind of compared Joe Milton to Cam Newton in the offseason. He was one of the quarterbacks we compared him to. I see that more now in this way. Joe Milton's very much a front runner, I feel like, which is, you, as you said, if things get a little bit off, it seems like he starts to spiral really fast. But once he's
why wouldn't he? I mean, if you look at his career, bad things have happened throughout his career, especially when he's been presented with fantastic opportunities. So maybe this is the type of game where he realizes that, hey, the world is not falling just because, or the sky's not falling, the world's not falling apart just because things aren't going well at that particular moment. So, Caleb, I wouldn't blame him if he had the woe is me mentality, but this may be the type of game or a stepping stone for him to get over that mentality. So better it happen against Virginia than against Florida in a couple of weeks, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. I'm selling him short. I mean, that he did complete 21 to 30 passes for 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, ran for another 2. So, I mean, Joe Milton had the stat line, the exact type of stat line you won in this game, and it should have been 260 yards and 3 touchdowns. But that Ramel Keaton drop, obviously, was probably a big factor. It just seemed like things spiraled right after that drop. So, yeah, I am on your side. Don't get me wrong. I think Joe Milton, there's no concern about Joe Milton. It's not like there's a quarterback controversy. One of the biggest things that stand out too, and I just posted the 5 takeaways up from the game. If you guys want to take a look at that, the offensive line is a mixed bag. I'm actually very pleasantly surprised with what Ollie Lane did at center in place of Cooper Mays. But at the same time,
I thought he provided. I thought the interior of the offensive line provided a really good push up the middle, and I think that's as much due to what Tennessee does offensively with splits, but not to interrupt your point, I agree. I thought that Ollie Lane did a really good job.
Yes, I thought he did a great job. And we knew Javontes Fraggins would, and I'm pretty pleased with what Andres Carrick did if I'm a Tennessee fan. On the outside, Tennessee's got an issue at left tackle. I'm raising the red flag right now. They got a major problem at left tackle, Dave. John Campbell Jr. had about 3 bad plays that stood out in the first half pretty quickly. I mean, he whiffed on that 4th and 1 block. I don't know if you remember when Tennessee didn't convert on the 4th and 1 on the second drive. Completely whiffed. You should never not convert a 4th and 1 run up the middle because the tackle whiffed. That should never happen in football. And
here's do you want to hear the good news or the bad news about John Campbell Jr.? Because they're the same news. Is that I was told he was having a little bit of trouble grasping the offense way back in spring, and that hasn't gone away to this point. So is that good news in that he could overcome that? Because physically he had a couple of blocks that I thought were fantastic. So physically I think he's got it in spades, but I think that when you look at him and the likelihood that he takes a wrong step or two, that he gets himself out of position as he did on the play that you're referring to, you would think that's fixable, but it hasn't been fixable from January to September in the offseason. And I don't think Virginia presented Tennessee with a lot of looks they hadn't seen before.
Right. And if you're not going to fix it over 9 months, when are you going? Isn't there a certain point where you say, all right, they're just never going to be able to figure this out?
Well, it's possible, but I didn't think he was anywhere close to that bad, especially against a veteran defensive line group.
Not as veteran as we thought, though, because remember, Chico Bennett was not in this game.
That's true. All right, let's get your thoughts on the message board. We would love to hear from you there. Always like to get you on board. We'll be with you after each and every game throughout the season. So you can check us out on Twitter. You can also check us out on YouTube and wherever you podcast. So hit that like and subscribe button. Go ahead and share it with your friends and turn your notifications on. And we join you each and every weekday at 10 a.m. Eastern. And a new announcement for the program: Spencer Riley, former Tennessee center, will be our Monday guest. So he'll have a good look at the interior of that offensive line on Monday. That should be a lot of fun talking to Spencer. As far as Tennessee's defense, I challenge you to come up with anything bad about that group because I just thought they were fantastic. They were exactly, again, this is Virginia and they're bad, okay? But this is exactly what we thought Tennessee's defense would be. And Caleb, that's deep up front. They didn't have to use as many exotic blitzes and stunts and twists as they did last year to create pressure. There were times where Tennessee won a lot of one-on-one matchups, and that wasn't the case last year.
I'm going to give you a lot of praise and a lot of props. You and Fred White, Dave, both of y'all.
Thanks.
Y'all kept talking about James Pierce Jr. all season. You guys were like, put him in just put bubble wrap around him was what you said. And man, I see why y'all were talking about that today. He showed up big time too with 2 sacks. Tyler Barron got 2 sacks. You're right. You couldn't say anything negative about the defense. They held Virginia to under 200 yards. Take away that one drive. I guess it was the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter, where Virginia scored a touchdown. Outside of that one drive, I think Virginia had negative rushing yards on the day. I mean, that's incredible.
I'll make a crazy hypothetical prediction, if you don't mind. If they don't give up a field goal in the first half, that drive doesn't happen. When you've got a goose that you're playing for up on the board, a potential shutout, you don't let that drive happen. When there's 3 on the board, I think a defense's mentality can get a little bit more lax because a shutout's special, right? That wasn't at stake at that point. So, yes, I thought they got a little bit lax.
Yeah, that's a good point. I thought so too. They weren't playing. That was one drive where you say the phrase a lot, which is true. Hair on fire. That's the one drive the defense didn't play with its hair on fire. But guess what? They went right back to doing that after they let Virginia score. I think they did, to their credit, they did take it personal a little bit that they let Virginia score. They didn't score a touchdown, not a field goal. So I think they were upset about that. So they came right back and they were just dominant again in the next few drives. I know Amari Thomas got dinged up. I don't think he came back in the game, but I think that was cautionary. I wouldn't have put him back in the game either, given the dominance. But
it looked like everybody to me, except for Monmouth's quarterback, Tony Muskett, was fine. Tennessee had a couple of people. I think there were some cramps involved. Tennessee had a couple of people. Squirrel White went down for a second, but it looked like everybody was fine. Travis asked Monday, Labor Day. Oh, yeah, man. Labor Day ain't a holiday if you cover football. I was at one place, and they said, we got to take Labor Day off. I was like, uh-oh. I just went to the wrong place. Now, I'll say this, too. I think that if you want a clear indication of how bad Virginia was or is, that Josh Heupel pretty much told you, and I'm going to write a column about this. Going for it on your own end where they were on that 4th down, that's not sound football unless you know you're playing a bunch of dudes that just can't stack up with you, right?
No, I disagree.
Really?
I'm a massive analytics guy. I believe in analytics, and every Harvard expert has said the punt is the most overused play in college or in football, period. A punt is a turnover. I don't care what anybody says. A punt is you're giving the ball to the other team. And it's a 4th and 1. You're more likely to convert that first down every time over than you are to keep the other team from getting to where you are on the field if you punt it to them 100 times over.
There's just no way, no how I'm going for that on my own end.
I'm going for it 4th and 1 every single time, unless it's like a 7-0 game in the 4th quarter and it's been a defensive slugfest. But otherwise, I go for it on 4th and 1. I don't care where I am on the field.
Somebody said on Twitter that you had been bashing Dylan Sampson. I don't recall that.
Did I ever bash Dylan Sampson?
I don't remember that. We were actually, and have reported, we were told in spring camp that he is going to be the man. That talk kind of cooled in the summer, and we've heard about Jalen Wright and that sort of thing. But listen, Dylan Sampson's got to stay healthy because he's not huge. But Dylan Sampson's going to be your 4th quarterback. I don't care who starts anymore. I think that's so silly, and it just doesn't matter anymore. But I'll go ahead and tell you right now, your 4th quarterback is going to be Dylan Sampson in key games. That guy can absolutely make things happen, and you have just seen a glimpse of it. You saw a glimpse on Saturday. You saw a couple of glimpses last year. The guy has a better grasp of pass protection. He blew one against LSU last year that resulted in one of the few positive plays for the Tigers. But I mean, this guy has a potential to be the Alvin Kamara type that really doesn't every program want more so than the old power back who runs between the tackles.
Yes, Tennessee has 3 fully reliable running backs this year, whereas last year they had 2, maybe even 1.5. You got Dylan Sampson, who's your all-purpose back, but Dylan Sampson, as we're seeing, can pick up and pass protection. Now, you can rely on him regularly. Jalen Wright put on the weight, and he's now just a faster Jabari Small. Like everything Jabari Small could do last year, Jalen Wright can do this year, but with more speed. He actually, one thing I noticed with Sampson and Wright, Dave, I'm going to invoke Travis Stevens. You ever notice the patience they had taking the ball at the middle, waiting for the right cut to make? There was a run Jalen Wright had specifically at the end of the second quarter where he waited perfectly for the right hole to open up and he hit it and cut it. And I think that Tennessee can reliably use 3 running backs. And you're right, Dylan Sampson is going to be the playmaker of them. 4 touchdowns. Guys, Gene McKeever, I made a joke with Dave earlier this week about historical Vols, and he has the record for touchdowns in a game, not by quarterback, and it was 5. And Dylan Sampson almost got there. I mean, he really got close. He had 4 in this one. I'm a little upset because I bet on Jabari Small scoring the first touchdown of the game and said it was Dylan Sampson. Dave, you got me with that one because you said it would not be Small. But I will say that you're right. Dylan Sampson's the biggest weapon. But let's not take away what Wright did, who was superb running between the tackles in this one.
No, no. Jalen Wright's a fantastic back. It is so funny how just 367 days ago or whatever it was, weren't we talking about Jabari Small being the guy? If you had to draft those guys right now, just after today, overreaction time. But if you had to draft those guys right now, isn't he third?
Yeah, he's third because you have Jalen Wright. But I mean, let's not short sell Small. I mean, he still had 13 carries, 67 yards, 5 yards a carry.
Totally agree. That's a bit of an overreaction. No, I totally agree. I don't want to sound like I knocked him. So I know everybody wanted to see Joe Milton perform well. He's a tough guy not to root for. But there was every reason for him to go out there and spit the bit. I mean, there's a lot on him, and this is it. If he doesn't do it this year, he's not going to do it. If he goes out there and he has questions about his accuracy into October, into November, then maybe he'll be the next Anthony Richardson that gets drafted high, but maybe he won't. But this is it. I mean, this is it for him. So I thought just a lot of maturity in how he came out and he led Tennessee's football team to an early score that made a statement. And then the way he closed out and regained composure, I thought was very strong. Sometimes we hold these guys to too high of a regard. There were times when Peyton Manning lost composure. So we're talking about Joe Milton maybe losing composure for maybe 5 or 6 plays where he missed maybe 3, maybe 4 open receivers. But other than that, I think you've got to be really pleased with Joe Milton. And I don't think there's any need for Nico talk anytime soon.
Right. What's very clear in this game, unless Heupel was saving some things, and that's very possible he was, but it does seem like Tennessee's going to work the field a lot more this year than they did last year. They're going to move the sticks a lot more. You talked about that all offseason. It was very clear they wanted to do that, Dave. I mean, he did that pass that Ramel Keaton dropped. That was the first deep shot he took all game, and that was on the 3rd drive of the game. Heupel really wanted to move the ball, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that with Milton. There were still a lot of those kind of hitch routes, screen passes over the middle. And so you're not going to see the, 9.5 yards per attempt that Hendon Hooker had last year. I don't think you're going to see that with Joe this year. I think you might see like 7.5, 8 yards per attempt.
No, and that's fine. I thought the pass to Jacob Warren was, by the way, Jacob Warren, the Vol Report, brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Haun. They did my Lasik. They can do yours. Cataract surgery as well. And also, they've got your annual vision checkups. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Haun, local vision. We'll have the Vol Report brought to you by them tomorrow, and we'll get to talk to Jacob about his first touchdown in quite some time. Didn't have one last year. That's his pass. I mean, the slants, the over the middle routes where you can put heat on a ball. I think it was Jesse Palmer at one point said you have no choice but to catch that, or it's going to go through your chest. Those are the balls that he is not only lacking accuracy questions, but you can go ahead and say it. He is incredibly accurate on those passes. He was against Clemson. That's not a fluke anymore. That's part of his MO. That's part of his sketch when he goes to the NFL. It's not going to be overall accuracy is an issue, even if parts of his accuracy continue to be. It's going to be his accuracy outside the hashes can be an issue. It's not overall accuracy anymore. I don't believe that as good as he is over the middle of the field, period. That's, to me, that is out of my mind. I doubt I'll even bring it up anymore.
He did miss one over the middle, though. Remember to Squirrel White in the second quarter when things were stalling? Am I nitpicking Dave for that? Am I being a little unfair?
A little bit. I mean, I think that's, one of, however many it won a game. I mean, Joe Montana missed Jerry Rice once a game. So Tennessee has an opportunity to go back and take a look at things. They didn't play necessarily their best game, but if they played their best game, it's 70-0. I mean, nobody plays their best game. I was just thoroughly impressed by a team that came out, I thought had a lot of confidence, borderlining on cockiness, to be real honest with you. And they lived up to the billing. And then things got tough for just a second, and they answered. And I was very impressed. William said Joe got everyone involved in the passing game. That is a very positive sign. Okay, you talked about the Ramel Keaton pass that you thought was a turning point in the game. This wasn't a turning point that I'm going to mention, but it's the very first touchdown pass that I was most impressed of Joe Milton by. All of the plays that he made in this game, and there were bigger plays, but this was a touchdown pass in which he dropped back in the red zone, and he was patient. He looked throughout. If you remember, he looked throughout the entire end zone, couldn't find an open guy. What did he do? Threw a swing pass to Dylan Sampson, who scored. And Joe Milton a couple of years ago, or a lot of young receivers, they don't do that, Caleb. They try to fit it into a tight spot, and Virginia had dropped everybody into coverage. That would have been a mistake. That was, to me, his best, most savvy play of the game, the very first touchdown pass.
Yes, you're right. That was a lot of composure by him because he was very patient. And I'm positive Dylan Sampson was in his first read. By the way, Joe Milton has already made more second.
I don't know that he was his third read.
You're right. That's a good point. Joe Milton has already he's at the latest his third read, maybe his fourth. And I'm just going to say it. Joe Milton's already made more third read completions than Hendon Hooker did his entire time at Tennessee. I think every Hendon Hooker completion was a first read, honestly. And that's not Hooker's fault. I mean, your first read's there, you take it. But yeah, no, Dylan Sampson, I mean, he was open in the flat. Milton was calm. It was fourth down too. Don't forget that. It was if you don't convert this, you're not scoring. And he does. He throws it to Sampson, and that's so different from the Joe Milton who panicked and ran at the end of the game against Ole Miss 2 years ago. It also helped, I'm going to be honest, that Virginia had the worst defense in the history of man called in that game. I mean, we just talked about it. You got a left tackle in John Campbell Jr. who's not been tested, if you're the opposition research, you have to know what we know about him to some degree, and you're going to drop everybody back and not try to bring at least one guy to pressure him from that side. I think that was bad coaching right there on that defensive play, and that did help.
I'll tell you this too. You don't win a Heisman in September. You don't win a Heisman in October. Okay. So I realize I'm putting the cart way before the horse, but he is a well-known enough name that he doesn't have to overcome being an unknown to win the Heisman, because most guys, this is his third time to be the man. Okay. But he's tabbed the man. Most of the guys get one chance at that, and it either works out or it doesn't. So he was named the man. He would theoretically have to build up his name over time to even get in a position to win the Heisman. But everybody talks about his 90-yard arm and how they all know him so well. And Tennessee's offense is exciting, and they've heard about his story. He has the preseason pub that no other returning starter. It's not a first-year starter. You see the term I'm trying to come up with, that no other returning starter in the nation would have. He's got a ton of preseason pub.
He does. And here's what's going to help. Again, Joe Milton's if we're going to talk Heisman, let's go ahead and call it out. Joe Milton's entire Heisman campaign, though, is going to come down to Georgia in November. That's the most Heisman of Heisman games possible, because it's going to be, look, guys, we've looked at Tennessee's schedule. I'm sorry. No one's going to watch Tennessee of national media outside of Alabama and Kentucky and Georgia. So what they're going to think if Joe Milton balls out outside of those games is, oh, system quarterback, that's just Josh Heupel. It's just anybody who works on his system. They're going to have to see him perform, and they're going to see him perform against Georgia if Tennessee's relevant. That's his Heisman game. It literally all comes down to Georgia, because after watching Florida on Thursday, after watching Tennessee today, Dave, I mean, I'm almost ready to pound the gavel and say Tennessee is not losing more than one game before they go to Georgia. I don't see them losing anybody outside of Alabama.
Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Real estate experts with over 4 decades of experience there in the Knoxville area. Go to AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Best service, best prices in the business. It's Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. It's really hard to find a player that didn't play well in this game, quite frankly. Caleb, and we're supposed to analyze this, but I mean this is a pretty darn good day at the office. I try to evaluate each of my days. We had a pretty good day at the office last week, and I finally said at the end of the day, I got to be pleased with that one. You got to be just content and happy every once in a while. These guys should go out and celebrate however they do, and realize that they came out with the nation watching them at a noon game, and they balled out. They did a great job.
Yeah, and you're in Las Vegas. You've got Austin Peay next week, so it's not like you have to refocus your efforts for any game that matters. So I would encourage, if you're of age and you play for Tennessee, go enjoy Las Vegas tonight. Take some of your NIL money and put it to good use.
Go ahead and give us your thoughts. SC Scout guy's totally right. You have to remember this is a pretty terrible UVA team. It is, and we discussed that last week. How many teams in Power 5 conferences are worse than this UVA team? There aren't many, Caleb. I think we came up with Northwestern, Vanderbilt, Stanford. That was about all we came up with, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I agree. But it's not like when Tennessee played Akron or Ball State last year. I think there is a little more value than those games. And UVA did almost beat Syracuse last year. They only lost to North Carolina by a field goal last year. Miami needed overtime to beat them last year, and they did beat Georgia Tech on the road last year. And you would think they would be somewhat better in Tony Elliott's second season. So I don't think it's like they're playing air. Put it that way. It's not a good team, but last year's team was 3-7. I would think this year's team is better than last year's team to a certain degree. I think it's just, we're learning this with Josh Heupel. If you're a tier below Tennessee, and when I say tier below, I mean if you're on the level of not being able to compete with Tennessee, they're going to pour it on you and make you look bad. That's just what they're going to do. Yeah,
and Josh Heupel's cocky. He is. I mean, he just doesn't say it, but he's cocky. I mean, I'm still going to argue with you that going for it on 4th down on your own side, inside your own 30, is a bad call. But you have to at least say that it's a very competent call. It's not just an analytics thing. He's very confident in that they were going to be able to get the job done. And remind you that our new sponsor on board that's going to be a part of that Sunday show with Fred White is Harold Group Security Solutions. Leadership, experience, specialization, addressing problems through unique mission-specific mitigation techniques. If you need security, like many of our schools do, they now provide that to private schools. So I encourage you to check out HaroldGRP.com, or perhaps have your school administrators, especially at private schools, do that. HaroldGRP.com. Harold Group Security Solutions will bring us that Sunday show with Fred White. So tomorrow, a big lineup. Or Sunday, a big lineup, depending on when you're watching. We'll have the Vol Report with Cooper Mays, brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Haun. The Vol Report with Jacob Warren, brought to you by I'm sorry, I got them backwards, didn't I? The Vol Report with Jacob Warren, brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Haun. The Vol Report with Cooper Mays, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Go to cityheatandair.com. They do need to get that kickoff thing worked out. I don't know why 2 of those sailed out of bounds. That wasn't great.
Yeah, look, they have new kickers across the board, a new kicker, a new punter, and a new kickoff specialist. Jackson Ross, that rugby punt style doesn't seem to be working too well. Luckily for Tennessee, they're probably not going to have to use him a lot this year. But I agree, that's something they kind of have to figure out. Sidebar, before we go, I do have to mention this. we got to give Tim Banks a few more props. Also, I mean, people are going to talk about.
I actually give him less props on this game than the various times I gave him mega props last year. I think he's got something to play with now. I think he's, when you go in those video games and you get to choose your car, one's easier to drive, but it doesn't go as fast. I think he's got, I think he's at Dave & Buster's in the fast car now.
Okay, fair enough. I still don't think he has a lot to play with in the secondary, though. And a lot of people are going to brag about the second.
By the way, that was the worst analogy ever. Go ahead.
I think that people are going to tout the secondary play in this game because I don't think Virginia got even 100 yards passing through the air. I don't think the secondary had nothing to do with holding Virginia to under 100 yards. That was all about the pass rush. And it was all about the stunts and blitz that Tim Banks was dialing up. You and I could have played safety out there in this game, Dave, and we wouldn't have.
Well, I agree with that, but you have no reason to think it's not good.
I still have reason to think it's not good. I got a whole year's worth of evidence.
But right, based off Saturday's 60 minutes of football, you don't have any reason to believe Tennessee's secondary isn't good. Fair?
Right. To this point, I don't have any reason to believe their secondary isn't good. I just am not yet a believer. I will say, funny enough, because I said Wesley Walker was the best defensive back. I didn't think about the fact that he graduated from Ensworth High School, and I was one of the guys that remember when I said Ensworth has the worst of the worst when it comes to overrated kids, and I'm a believer in Wesley Walker. But
so give me, I'm trying to come out of this with any surprises. Not that we were that great at covering what we were hearing beforehand, but I guess the Ramel Keaton drop because I thought he was as solid as anybody in terms of his hands. That was a surprise that he would drop a pass.
Ollie Lane's a surprise.
Okay, I'll give you. Okay, Ollie Lane's a surprise. That's number one. Can I give you number two? Sure. That the punt return team is just that good. Now, I thought they would be above average, but they're very good. He's D. Williams. He had the fumble, right?
Yes,
he had the fumble, but he's going to return 2 or 3 punts for a touchdown, I believe, this year. I've no question in my mind.
Yes, that is true. I agree. The punt return team, but I still don't know if that was a surprise because we saw flashes of this last year, if you remember, with D. Williams. So it's hard for me to get to calling this a surprise because D. Williams, I think, averaged like 12 or something yards per punt return last year. He ran one back for a touchdown. So I'm not going to call that.
Well, yeah, but and he had a big one against LSU. But here's my thing. Usually in a game, when you rip one punt return for a significant game, and maybe Virginia, it just isn't this good, but usually your special team bucks up and you don't give up another one. How many times do you see 2 big punt returns by one team in a game? Because it's simple as, for the most part, unless you're just getting manhandled, it's as simple as being disciplined and using proper technique and staying in your lanes.
Yeah, that's true.
That's really not that hard.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a fair point.
And they had 3 significant returns in a game.
They did. I didn't know if Josh Heupel prioritizes special teams or not, or how much he does, but everything I'm seeing suggests he does. So I think that, yeah, this is going to be a regular part for Tennessee. By the way, this is why I bet the under on the Joe Milton 280 yards, because I said they're going to get a lot of short fields. Dave, they got a lot of short fields in this game.
Yeah. Fans cheering for Nico at the end, is that good or bad for Tennessee's program?
I think it's fine.
I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good.
Oh my gosh. Dave.
No, because
really?
if there's a slip up against Florida or Alabama or something that in some way, shape, form is Joe Milton's fault, and it very well could be. I can't remember a lot of games. Maybe the 2001 SEC championship game where the quarterback played a stellar game and that team lost. Usually the quarterback has to make some sort of mistake, and I can't remember. So if they lose a game, Milton's probably going to have some of the blame to carry. But if they lose one of those games, Tennessee's fan base is going to be all about, hey, play Nico. Why are you playing Joe?
Yeah, Twitter was already running to do that in the second quarter. I mean, they were already ready to.
Are you serious?
Yes. Dave, do you know Vol Twitter? Of course they were. Vol Twitter is the most reactionary fan base you'll ever find. And it's hilarious. And people finally learned that on a national scale last year, because that was the first time since Twitter existed that Tennessee was nationally relevant. But yeah, I think that Nico, it's no different than, again, I bring up Tim Tebow, Chris Leak, 2006. Florida fans cheered Tim Tebow every time he came onto the field. Chris Leak still held that job, and Chris Leak, I know Tennessee fans don't like him, but you got to give him credit for being mentally tough enough to hold that job the whole year, and he was still the leader of that team.
You want to hear something crazy? Tennessee doesn't have to show anything anytime soon. And I'm going to tell you why. You pull up their schedule for a second. Meridian Insurance, covering your world. You're probably paying too much for insurance. So go to Shanda with a C, CHANDA, hasyoucovered.com for a free quote. Shanda hasyoucovered.com. With Meridian Insurance, she will save you perhaps hundreds of dollars a month with insurance options that you can't get just anywhere. When I look at Tennessee, and you want to talk about the Nico thing, get excited about the potential, but don't get excited about this happening anytime soon. Let's remember the guy has to put on a lot of weight. Let's remember the guy is still a freshman. But boy, if he had to go in there and play, I would have no doubt that he could go in there and play. You? Yeah,
I have no doubt either. I have no doubt. And everything you talked about in the offseason, he showed on one play, which is, you are right. He's a more fluid runner than Joe Milton is. Much more fluid runner.
Yep. No, absolutely. And so any other takeaways defensively? I thought we might see a little bit more out of Arian Carter, but how many opportunities are there when you essentially have two linebacker positions? Probably not a lot. We didn't see much out of the point I was going to get to. I'm sorry. I'm just going to be really honest with you. I lost my train of thought. It's been a long day there for a second. So when does Tennessee have to show anything? So I'm going to pull up the schedule right now, which you all know by heart. But I'm going to go ahead and pull it up and go through it. And I want, when does Tennessee have to show something? Because on our message board, great point by, I believe it was William, saying that didn't have to show anything, didn't have to reveal any wrinkles. Well, they didn't have to today. They're not going to have to against Austin Peay. The way Florida played against Utah on Thursday, they're not going to have to show anything. Maybe Texas San Antonio. That's going to be a much better team than people think. But Tennessee.
But still, as we talked about, when you're a tier below Tennessee, they make everybody look equally bad. And UTSA is a tier below Tennessee.
Agreed. Maybe you start to have to show things against South Carolina, but as far as, some of the things that we saw last year, the end arounds on the goal line, Princeton fan at fullback, some of the more exotic things, those things are all in the playbook. But Tennessee's not going to have to show them until October. And arguably, because I'm not high on South Carolina like a lot of people are, I think Tennessee wins that game easily, doesn't have to show a lot. You don't like A&M. You could be going – I like A&M a little more than you, but not a lot. You could be going into the Alabama game still with a bunch of good surprises left in your play calling bag. That would be an absolute huge advantage.
Yeah, it would be a gigantic advantage. And don't forget, A&M's coming off a bye too. So they get to play – I think they're going to sleepwalk their way to victory over A&M. I'm just going to tell you guys that now. So I agree. I think that it was funny. Jesse Palmer on the broadcast, I don't know if you listened to this towards the end, he talked about Tennessee's October stretch and he said, it's awful, trying to say it's brutal. And he was saying it in a negative way. And I'm thinking, I don't think it's that brutal. Okay, you got Alabama and Kentucky.
I thought he misspoke, actually. I rewound it to make sure I heard him correctly.
When he first said awful, I thought he was trying to say the schedule is easy or bad. But then he started talking about how tough it was going to be, and I'm like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? It's no. Come on, Dave. How many years have you covered Tennessee football? They've had a lot tougher Octobers than what they're dealing with this year. A lot tougher.
No, I think South Carolina's a middle of the road type of program in the SEC, and they beat Tennessee. So Tennessee can't say anything about that until they beat them. But I think A&M is finding itself with the new offensive coordinator. Alabama, it was announced, is going to go with Jalen Milroe, who I still think is better than the day where he had 3 turnovers last year. and then Kentucky to end the season. Now, Kentucky, I think, is going to be better than a lot of people think, and that's a tough one after Alabama. But yeah, that's to me a very run-of-the-mill October. That's not terribly difficult. It's not terribly easy. It's just the SEC.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing that really stands out about it. I didn't understand what Jesse Palmer was saying there. I think that Tennessee, we've talked about they're going to have to worry about Kentucky. But Dave, I'll tell you, it's funny you brought up Milroe. Tennessee fans should be happy. We're going to learn more tonight. And maybe I'll say this, and you guys are going to troll me tomorrow because maybe Jalen Milroe throws for 17 touchdowns against Middle Tennessee State. But everything in me feels like Nick Saban made this decision because nobody stood out at quarterback. Nobody won the job. That's the vibe I'm getting. Is it none of the other quarterbacks were able to win the job, and that's why Milroe was starting.
Oh, I agree. They don't bring those guys in unless they expect them to win the job. Williams said, did you notice how many backup players on D when Virginia scored running effectively? I think there were some backups in there for sure, but I don't care if you're second string against that Virginia team. You have to have a little bit of an emotional lapse to allow them to score, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And also Amari Thomas was on that drive and he got banged up. So they didn't use a lot of their second string. They still had a lot of starters too up front. I think that because you brought up, you're right. I didn't hear much from Carter. I didn't hear much from the linebackers outside of a couple of plays by Beasley in the first half, but I'm going to be fair to them. I think that was just the nature of the game and the flow of the game. And I think a lot of it more came from the pass rush on the outside with Barrett and Pierce. And because Virginia really couldn't run the ball at all because of the interior line, I don't think the linebackers were that necessary to do anything in this game. And so that's why I don't think you heard them a lot.
Yeah, I think they dropped into coverage because Tennessee's defensive line, they were winning one-on-one battles. They got pressure at one point with 3 rushers in that cheetah package where they dropped 8 into coverage. I mean, the poor kid from Monmouth, the quarterback, he didn't know what in the world to do. Jacob, what should people do if they like this? Because we broadcast live at 10 a.m. each and every weekday.
What's up, everybody? This is Jacob Warren asking you to like, subscribe, and share. Dave needs this.
Thank you very much. Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler, and they've got affordable game day accessories that you can check out at rickterryjewelry.com. Again, rickterryjewelry.com. They're right there on Kingston Pike. Just Google Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. The fire opal orange rings are absolutely gorgeous, and you'll love them. Also want to thank Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. I love following them on Facebook. Go to Facebook, look for Sports Treasures TN because they're sending out updates all the time, and it is fantastic because they've got some cool stuff. Like they had a Hendon Hooker signed helmet just the other day, and all kinds of fun stuff. And they're big into Pokemon, which I know Caleb is.
I'm not a Pokemon guy. Sorry, never was. Little brother is, but funny enough, my brother who teaches at Virginia, of all places, is into Pokemon. So
just run of the mill against Austin Peay. No reason to bring Cooper back. Do you see any shifting on the offensive line? Do you think that John Campbell may have put his job in jeopardy, that he played perhaps that bad? I thought he was just really hot and cold, which can almost be as bad as just playing poorly the entire game.
I thought Gerald Mincy should have come back in. Gerald Mincy split time last year at left tackle and actually wasn't that bad. Wasn't great, but wasn't that bad. And I think middle of the road left tackle is what you want at this point. You don't want hot and with offensive line. Let's be honest, with left tackle, hot and cold's bad because cold, that is 1 or 2 plays that totally change the game. If it's this game
at offensive tackle, you're right. I mean, that could be a strip bumble right there. Tennessee Cider Company, use the promo code HAT, the original hard cider of the Smoky Companies. Smoky Mountains, if you use the promo code HAT, then you're going to get free swag with any purchase. You can get their cider delivered just about anywhere in the United States of America. Pretty awesome. And Zen Sports bringing the cash back to Tennessee. Zen Sports betting just got better. So big day tomorrow. Hit the like and subscribe button. You have to do that. Turn your notifications on because we're going to be dropping content on a Sunday. Sleep. Who needs sleep? He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend, everyone. Tennessee with a big win over Virginia, 49-13. as the Vols didn't have to show much except some maturity in the middle of the first half when their offense hit a bit of a lull. They also showed that the defense may be as good or better up front than advertised. This has been a